Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 71 for May 2017. I am your co-host, the first, Quinn Dunkey, and with me as always is co-host, the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
Kansas Fest approaches ever closer. I can't wait.
It does. It's coming very close. Are you all ready for it?
I am. I can't wait to see the sights and talk to the people and do the things at the place where it happens.
Yeah. Yes, and sweat my butt off.
Yeah, it does get a bit hot there, doesn't it?
Yes.
if you're from out west, like both Quinn and I and our guests today are, and you're not used to what happens when you go back east, it gets a little hot and sticky.
Yeah. Whoever settled in Missouri originally did not do it in July because they would have just kept walking, I think.
Yep. How are you, Quinn?
I'm good. I've not done a ton of retro computing lately, but I've been. What few moments I have for it, I have been working on my Kansas Fest presentation. So I really hope it'll get done in time. I'm sure, as all previous years, it will ultimately be finished on the airplane. But that's okay.
That's what airplane rides are for, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a decent enough flight. It's 4 hours from here, so it's a pretty good chunk of time to wrap things up. So
yeah, I had brunch yesterday with Chris Torrance and Jim Sammons, whose name you might recognize from the Soft Talk project, and he was with Muse Software early on, and it was a lot of fun. And they said to say hello. So hello, Quinn.
Excellent. Well, hello to both of them as well.
Yeah.
We talk about Chris Torrance a lot on this show.
Yeah, and we should probably have Jim on at some point because he's got some really great stories that I think people would love to hear.
Capital. Well, we'll add to the backlog of people that we love to talk to.
There you go.
And speaking of which, we have a guest lined up today who we've been meaning to talk to for quite a while because he's been doing very fun stuff. We've been talking about him a lot, so it's fun to finally get the chance to talk to him. We are joined today by Michael Packard, who is writing a series of games, the first of which is Alien Downpour, and he started the Facebook group dedicated to that book whose name I can never remember, Apple Arcade Game Design and...
It's Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design Enthusiasts. It's not that hard.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes. Perfect intro. Welcome to the show, Michael. How you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Why don't we jump right into the stuff that everybody wants to know about first, I'm sure, which is Alien Downpour. How did you start with that, and where did that come from, and how are things progressing?
It actually started as a tech demo. Last year I decided right around Kansas Fest, I decided that I would finally sit down and learn how to program Apple II assembly. It was kind of a midlife crisis thing. My wife won't let me chase after wine, women, and songs, so I chased after retro computing.
Same thing.
What do you do? So I decided to try to learn how to program. So I sat down and I started saying, okay, well, I need to learn how to do scrolling stars. So I looked up Alien Rain. And I was playing the game, and I was staring at how the stars were moving, and I was trying to figure out, I wonder if I could do that. Well, I started to sit down, and I wrote, I started working on the stars moving, and I got that going. And it's like, cool, I got stars. And it's like, okay, what else would I need to do? Okay, I need to have some text on the screen, so I learned how to do text. Anyway, so it started out as just me trying to figure out how to program something, and all of a sudden it's Alien Downpour.
That's fantastic. And yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen the game yet, we'll of course link to it in the show notes. It's looking really, really great. It's kind of in the genre of something like Galaxium, but I think the polish level and the variety of enemies that you've got is really, really great.
Oh, thanks.
And can you tell us a little bit about your development process? Because I think it's kind of interesting because you started out at least really, really old school, right? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Oh, completely old school. I decided that if I was going to learn how to program on the Apple II, I'd do it the way the people did it back in the day. Now, back in the day, I actually worked with a lot of software companies. I did programmer support. I did art cleanup and stuff like that on the Apple II. Way back in the day, I worked with Berger Becky for years and years and years, but both at Interplay and doing freelance jobs. So we did that. I would take graphics and stuff that we ported over from like the Commodore 64 or some other thing, and then I would clean them up for the Apple II. I've got credits on tons and tons of games from back in the day. World Karate Championship and California Games and World Games and a whole bunch of stuff. I worked for tons and tons of companies back in the day. But I never programmed in assembly. I just never had time. I was an AppleSoft programmer for years. That's how I paid my way through college. But anyway, I decided to do that. And I figured if I was going to do it, I'd go back and I'd start with Merlin. So DOS 3.3, because I don't like ProDOS. I've always found it user hostile, and I don't want anything hostile. I just want to do it. So I started with Merlin 2.43 because it ran in 80 columns and it ran in DOS 3.3. And I started from the basics. I picked up Chris Torrance's wonderful book, Assembly Lines, of Roger Wagner. And then we started doing that. I got through, did every exercise in the book, and then I pulled out Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design, which is a great book. If you want to know everything about the Apple II high-res screen and the crazy quirks in programming the thing, that's the best book out there. At least the best book I found. So we went through Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design, and it taught the basics. So once I knew enough assembly to be dangerous, I jumped into Merlin and just started experimenting. Just see what I could come up with. If I can get anything drawn on the screen, I can draw anything on the screen. So, if you can get one thing working, you can get everything working. And the process I went through was to to figure out the bare minimum things I need to do a game. Okay, there are some what I call a game engine. Several years ago, I wrote one completely from scratch and wrote a book on it. But there are certain things that you need. You need to be able to draw things on the screen. You need to be able to move things on the screen. You need to be able to animate things on the screen. You need to be able to draw text. You need to be able to, if you have scrolling stars, have scrolling stars moving and stuff like that. So I set out to build a game engine of all the things to do all the heavy lifting in the game. And then once you have all the background stuff, writing the rest of the code's easy. It's just setting up those routines and calling those routines. So we started with that. I started to be able to put a graphic on the screen and then put a bigger graphic on the screen. And then to be able to animate something in place, just sitting there, different animation frames. Okay, let's try moving it up and down. Moving it up and down, that's easy to do. Then the hard part, okay, moving it left and right and not having it change color because the Apple II graphics are quirky. If you want to move something left and right and be able to keep it the same color, you need to have seven shifts of that image. One for each pixel move. Each unit move. A unit move is 2 pixels. Because if you move a color, something that's purple over 1 pixel, it turns green, and you move it another pixel, it turns purple again. So when you do horizontal movements, you do horizontal movements in 2 pixel increments. So anyway, I had to figure out, okay, so now I have 7 shifts, so I can draw something anywhere. If I knew what pixel it needs to go on, I can find the right shape, So then I built a system for doing that. So all I have to do is tell it, okay, put it on, pixel number 120, and it knows which shift to go, and then it draws the right thing in the right place. Well, once you have that, you're free. Once you solve every insurmountable problem, you never have to solve it again. You have a routine that does it, so you don't have to think about it ever again. Like when I wanted to have something that drew text on the screen, once I have something that I can send a message to and it will draw it, I can draw it anywhere. All I have to do is set up a table of where it needs to go. Where the text message is, where it needs to draw on the screen, and, each tab and V-tab, and just let it go. So we started doing that, and so I had a message. I built a little box with my logo on it, and then I put little birds on top of it flapping their arms, and then I did a demo of it. I said, okay, let's change the Y value. So it starts moving up, and then, having it animate in place. I said, okay, well, we got something going. So then I started looking around at, what to do. I wrote a Pac-Man game years ago, so I thought, well, let's see since I have a thing that draws text, let's go and see if I can make a tile set that will draw a Pac-Man maze. So I did that. And then I've got 9 Pac-Man mazes. The next game is Pac-Man. We call it Snacking On or something. That's where I got the name of the software company, Snacking On Software. Anyway, so, and then from there I started just experimenting different things I can do. I developed a little side-scrolling mountain thing that reminded me of like Defender or something, and I was just kind of casting around, just like, okay, everything that I kind of would like to do in a game, let's do it, find an example of it, and then try to mimic it and see if I can do that. So we did I found the scrolling stars thing and did that, and then I put a ship at the bottom of it, and somebody asked me if I was doing a vertical scroller. And I wasn't at the time, and I was just joking. Oh yeah, I'm going to call it Alien Downpour as a joke, and I was just throwing it out there. And then I thought it would be funny to do a logo for it, but what I found is once I did the logo, I had to do the game. It's like, oh my God, that looks really cool. Because I used to do art back in the day, and then we've been playing with all the utilities that have been coming out lately, like Buckshot, and I had Bill Buckles things for the last year or so playing with that. So I designed the logo in Photoshop, and then converted it. I have a filter in Photoshop that takes out every other pixel, so you can get something in color. On the Apple II, the way the Apple II generates color is not by the pixel position; it's more by the absence of pixels. So if you have two pixels next to each other, it's white. But if you have a pixel by itself and nothing on either side, it's either purple or green or blue or orange, depending on the high bit setting. So if you have a bit and then a space and then another bit, you have 3 pixels of orange or 3 pixels of green. So I have a filter that I type the text in white, and then I apply the filter, and then it takes out every other pixel. And then I can take that and import that monochrome into the Apple II, and it will come out a color, purple or green or whatever, depending. So anyway, using the tools, I created something, and I created a logo. And then once I showed the logo on the Apple II, I was hooked. I had to do the game. So that's how that happened.
Very cool. I think actually it worked out well, because I think it's actually a really great name. It tells you sort of what the game's going to be, and it's got a nice ring to it. Yeah,
because I was thinking, if I wanted it to kind of be an homage to everything that's happened before. Everything that happens in Alien Downpour is either a direct homage or it's just a throwback to all the things that I really liked growing up on the Apple II. I started with computers way in the beginning. In 1976, I got my first computer. So it's like everything has happened. All pop culture references. It's got a million pop culture references in it. We're going to ludicrous speed. I actually have a picture of you going plaid. It's like, we went plaid. We're recalculating, because how you're on your GPS. Whenever you're somewhere wrong, it goes recalculating. So it's like,
that's great.
Yeah. So sometimes if you had it happens random places in the game. It's like, I think we should have took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. I think. So I think we took a wrong turn at Albuquerque, and then it just a pause in the game just for a laugh.
So you said you're working in Merlin, and are you working on real hardware or an emulation or some combination?
Yeah, all sorts of combination. I originally started programming it on my GS. I picked up the GS about a year and a half ago. I decided that I kind of missed the old Apple things, and I started getting nostalgic. So I thought I'd get a GS and see if I can learn how to program it. And that has now expanded to 7 Apples I have in my office right now. I've including a 1979 Apple II. Tony Bogan sent me to test stuff on. It's a non-auto start original Apple II, and I have that on my desk. But I've got 3 2Cs with different ROMs. I have an unenhanced 2E, and I have an enhanced Platinum 2E, and I have the GS. And yeah, I use the floppy emulator, so I can, if I'm working on the PC, I can just put the disk image on that and take it over to one of the Apples and play on it, and write actual disks. And I use the actual disks. But yeah, I started programming in Merlin 2.43 on in DOS 3.3 on the GS, and then I moved. Once I figured out I needed to take graphics and stuff, be able to create graphics on the PC and stuff, and move it over. I started working in the emulator, so I work in AppleWin most of the time now. But and 90% of the game is written actually under emulation and AppleWin. So we're using that. Once the game got too big, I kept having to split it off because Merlin's got a 32K code limit. So I kept having to split it off into smaller pieces and, make a massive table of equates in the main code to find everything. Once we hit that point about 90% in, I switched over. Now I'm using Merlin 32 on the PC, which is great because it's a command line thing, so I can make a batch file to have it assemble all the different parts, all the tables and everything. So if I ever change anything in any of the tables, my batch file will reassemble that part and then put everything together into one great big file.
That's awesome. Yeah, Merlin 32 is, I think that's Brutal Deluxe's tool. Is that correct?
Yeah. I also have I also use other tools. I use DataJerk's C2D for creating the disk image. He's been working with me on that because the disk image is so big now. I'm releasing the game on cassette and on disk, so everything has to load in one shot, and it got too big to put on a DOS disk to have DOS in there. So he's got a minimalist bootloader that will load my text loading screen and load the game and then disappear, so I can use all the memory. And I use all the memory. I think I finished out. I'm right at BFFD, I think. So it runs in 48K on any 48K Apple, even Apple IIIs. We got it running in Apple III emulation mode. So, but yeah, it'll run on a 1978 Apple II with 48K. I don't think they had 48K in 77 when it first came out, but if you got 48K on your old Apple II, it'll run. It'll run on the 2, the 2E, the 2C, the GS, and the Apple III. So, and all the other variants we've tested on everything, I think.
That's great. Well, Mike, he just saved you making an Apple III reference, so we got that out of the way.
Oh, I've been looking for an Apple III forever, because back in the day, that just, when you're 13 years old, you see that, you're going, oh my gosh, that's what a computer is, the Apple III. So I decided that I'm never going to be able to afford one. So I found a case on eBay just a couple of days ago it was $134 plus shipping. Shipping's crazy on it because it weighs like 80 pounds, right? But I got a case, and I've got to find a keyboard for it. And I figured I can plug in one of those keyboard encoders, retro encoder or
retro connector.
I have one for my Apple IIc. If that'll work with the Apple III keyboard, then I can plug a Raspberry Pi in the great big huge case, and then I can run an emulator on that. So it's like I have an Apple III, but
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to paging Charles Mingan. I'm not sure if he's got an Apple III one or not.
Well, I sent a message to him, but I haven't heard back from him yet. I think the encoder works with it, but I don't know.
Very cool. So for your next game, do you think you're going to stick with the old school method, or are you going to sort of gradually slide over into the modern side of things?
Well, I don't know. Merlin 32 is actually really convenient because I can write in a real text editor. I use EditPad on my PC, and that works pretty well. And I have all the tables and everything already converted over since I'm using them for Alien Downpour, so it'd be really easy to slide into it. But I don't know. Now that when I started programming this, I didn't know anything. I'm making this game up as I go. I'm learning how to program as I'm doing it. So it's like I sit there going, okay, how do I make it do that? I don't know. So I sit and I take a notebook, and I do most of my development actually longhand. I go to Del Taco down the street, and I sit there because they have free drink refills. You can sit there all day, So I'll go in with my notebook, and I'll sit there for a couple of hours thinking about stuff. And I write actually all my code out longhand. So I can see it as I'm writing it out there, and then I take it back to the computer and put it in. I found that just works much better for me because I can get off and I can write and I can think about stuff, and whatever comes to mind, I can sit down in a notebook and just do it. So
just like Woz used to do.
Yeah, there's There's definitely something to that. I mean, it forces you to think through your code more and like take your time and kind of think through the problem rather than just rushing to type out the first thing that comes to your mind and then spending hours debugging it.
Yeah, but yeah. So I sit through that and I do that, but yeah, that's been fun. But the whole point of Alien Downpour wasn't ever really set out to write it to release it for anybody else. I just wrote it for me to sit down and it's like, okay, well, let's see if I can do the things that all my heroes did back in the day. So I've got homages to Load Runner and I got homages to Choplifter in there, and so yeah, I have 3 slalom zones in there where I have apples I took the apple from Appleoids and beefed it up a little bit, and I have them dropping down and you're zigzagging through the thing, and I have a counter on there that's counting backwards to tell you how many you have left, but I have it counting in hex as an homage to all the times that I was thinking in decimal and the computer was thinking in hex. So I actually wrote it so it counts down in hexadecimal for that, just so you can do that. So yeah, you have to zigzag through 50 hex Appleoids. And I thought, well, we're trying to release it for the 40th birthday of the Apple II. That was my driving force. I wanted to have, if I was just doing it, just sit around and doing it, that it would never get finished. So I said, I want to get this done for the 40th birthday of the Apple II. So I had that always set on my calendar in front of me. It's like, here's what we have left to do. So we pretty much hit it by April 16th, the 40th birthday, according to my reckoning. I had 98% of the game actually done and working. So that was pretty good. We hit that, because I started programming this in last July, right around Kansas Fest. I started learning how to program this thing. So I think we hit it.
Yeah, I think if you release it anytime this year, I think it still counts.
Yeah. Well, it's done now. So we're in the process of duplicating it today, I hope, unless the playtesters find anything else. I have a few playtesters in the group that are banging on everything. So I playtest everything hard. That's what I used to do that for a living at Interplay. So I know how to break things. So whenever I introduce something in the code, I play that part ad infinitum, ad nauseum, just to make sure it works. But you never know, if you fix something, you might break something else somewhere down the road. So I have people testing everything else in the game to make sure it works.
That's great. So are you still taking orders for it?
Yes, I am. You can go to the website, www.berighteous.com, and hopefully you'll have a link in the show notes. And
for sure,
yeah. We're still taking pre-orders. I'm only making 100 cassettes at this point, just because it takes a long time to make cassettes, and I've never done it before, so we have no idea if it's going to work. But all of our tests have worked. I went so far to be retro on this as I went and I bought the same cassette deck that is mentioned in the 1978 basic manual that they recommend. It's a Panasonic cassette deck. I went and found a retro one. It's 45 years old, and I can load the game on it from, so I write the game to tape. I use the same guy that does my disk loader wrote this great thing. He runs the Apple II game server online. Mm-hmm. So if you ever run that, it has all the audio for the games. Well, this program's great. I can make my big binary file, and it takes the binary file and converts it into WAV. It'll compress it, so it takes half as long to load. It takes just about 2 minutes to load the game from tape with the compressor. It's great. You can have it. It'll show my little text loading screen as it's loading. It gives you an ETA at the bottom of the screen, tells you how long it's going to take to load. It's great. So yeah. So I converted on that, and I play the WAV file out into my cassette recorder, and I record it onto the cassette that way.
That's great. Yeah. Well, shout out to Diddy Jerk, friend of the show, for helping out with that.
His name's Egan Ford. He's been He's been helping me out immensely on this. He's got a credit in the game because I couldn't have done it without him, because I ran out of space. I couldn't load it. I couldn't load it even with max files or set to 1. I couldn't load it anymore in DOS. So he built this thing. It's great. His loader, I can go all the way up to B6FF, which is like way higher than the DOS buffers you could in DOS 3.3, and it's a lot faster than DOS 3.3 too.
That's cool. I admire your dedication to making the cassette version. I think that's one of my favorite parts of this whole story is that you're releasing it on cassette. And 100 cassettes, that's dedication. I think that might take a while to produce those, but I think it's fantastic.
I wanted it to be as retro as possible. I want to be able to run it on any Apple II hardware, any configuration. And, in the beginning, we had cassettes. I tell you, I was going to tell you, I wrote a whole thing out. I got my first computer back in 1977. One of my dad's hobbies was doing like electronic tinkering, so we were always building something fun. Like he wired this awesome little string of LEDs that would light up sequentially, go back and forth, back and forth. You remember like Battlestar Galactica way back in the day, and they had the Cylons. They had their little LED eyes that would go back and forth. And my dad made this thing. It was awesome. It was really cool. He had this like breadboard and he wired all the ICs to it and stuff. He did electronics tinkering, and you hooked up a battery to it. The lights went back and forth. We made toy cars with experimental solar panels back in the day. I think we got that from like the Edmund Scientific catalog. I don't know if you ever. That was like the greatest thing. We get the scientific catalog. When you're 11 years old, you're seeing telescopes, you're seeing, electronic parts, you're seeing all kinds of experimental things. It's like your mind just goes crazy with stuff. We love that stuff. We went and saw Star Wars, in the opening run when I was 11 in 1977. So we saw the Big Edwards Newport Cinema. I don't know if you've ever been out there, but it seated like several thousand people in the line, but all the way around. Anyway, my dad worked at Rockwell International in 77. I got a Rockwell AIM 65. It was like a single board computer, 6502 processor, a K of memory. Had a 20-column thermal printer on it. It prints on cash register tapes, right? So it'd go, oh, God. It was awesome. My dad built this awesome case for the thing out of wood. And the board was like mounted to the top, and it had a hinged acrylic noise shield that came down over the top, so you can lock it down, so the printer wouldn't make some crazy noise. And it had a 20-column LED display. It had one line of LEDs. That's how I started programming back in the day. It was awesome. We and my dad we wired the cassette interface for the thing. We actually breadboarded and wired it together. That was me and my dad. That was my dad's bonding thing when we were kids, man. Me and my dad did all that stuff, and it was pretty cool. I was the only kid in my junior high school to have a computer. People were going, no way. But yeah, I was the only one in high school. I was the only kid who had a computer. When the 2 Plus came out in around 1979, my dad cashed in his life insurance and bought the 2 Plus and a disk drive for us to learn and experiment on. It was kind of a bonding thing. It was really cool. He must have sunk in probably $2,000 or more back then. It was brand new when it first came out. And me and my dad, we'd go to computer club meetings back in the day. My dad was really interested in this stuff, but it was kind of a bonding thing just to have something for us to do together. And that was pretty amazing. And we'd go to the old Advanced Computer Products swap meets. Were you guys around back in the day? Mm-hmm. ACP was like Mecca. You'd go there, get all kinds of crazy stuff. But they'd have a swap meet a couple times a year where people would bring out surplus stuff, and it would be old computer stuff. You never knew what you would find. It was like magic. And we'd go to this thing, and it was just like, you're 13 years old and just geeking out. And I wanted to recapture some of those memories. When I started programming again, I started thinking about all that stuff. And it was like, I want to be able to kind of bring back just references to everything that happened back in the day. And I got so much stuff in Alien Downpour where when I'm writing a book on it this year, talking about what it's like for a 51-year-old person to sit down and try to learn 6502 assembly from scratch, and then write a game and what it takes to put the thing together and how the game engine works. And we're going to go source line by line through the source code, but I'm going to go through and make a list of all the pop culture references in the game. That should be half the book, I think. But
So how did you go? How did you go from swap meets to actually working in the industry?
oh, it was a gradual thing. I got a modem at some point, and then we started getting on the bulletin board systems. But yeah, it was, and that's where we met all the different people. Let's see, I've got notes here. Let's see if I can find it. It was funny. It's funny. I was going to put it on there. I was the only kid in my high school that had a computer, and so when they tell you to do an assignment and they want everything typewritten double space, I'd print it on my MX80 printer, right? And with both margins justified. And I got into arguments with everybody at the school. We actually had the we don't want the computer doing your homework conversation. It's like, no, it just makes my homework neater. But yeah, we had to go through that. I was the first person in my school ever to, we'd write a magic window on the Apple, and we do that. But yeah, we found bulletin board systems way back in the day. And one of the ones I frequented was called the Electric Warehouse, and it was a really active group. And we had parties, wares parties at the SysOps house, right? So we'd have 30 people with their Apple IIs. It'd look like Jonestown the morning after. We'd be all over the floor. We'd be just copying wares all night, and eating cheese paper. And remember, I don't know if you remember, back in the day, Little Caesars didn't have their pizzas in boxes. They had them in great big sleeves, and you get 2 pizzas on a sleeve. Two pieces of pizza on cardboard and a paper sleeve, like pizza, right? Well, anyway, you get like 5 of those sets stacked on top of each other. You get cheese paper. So that's, and sauce crust, it's like, that's what we did. But we did that at the wares parties. We were a real active group. We had, probably, we'd have 30 people at the group. But one of the nexuses of the group was Burger Becky Heineman. I don't know if you guys know her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's been on the show.
Yeah. But yeah, I've known her for 35 years now. But she was kind of the nexus of the group. She was the programming god. She was called Dr. Death back in the day. And she'd be cracking wares and stuff. So people would bring stuff in and, and would challenge her to do that. And she would crack it in like 10 minutes or something. And then we'd make copies of it for everybody. But yeah, eventually everybody there worked for Interplay. For her, the system operator worked at Egghead Discount Software. I say that because that's how I always answer the phone. Egghead Discount Software. This is Mike. But so originally all of us worked there because it was gainful employment, right? We all eventually worked at Egghead, and then once Interplay took off, most of us got sick of Egghead, or when Egghead closed, we all migrated over to Interplay to work with Burger, and that was fun. I worked in the playtest department for a while, and then I started designing games. Because we all did that. We all, the Interplay, everybody did everything. So, sometimes I would be playtesting games, or I would do artwork. I did 3D artwork and cutscene animations for Star Trek Judgment Rights and Star Trek 25th Anniversary. Coincidentally, it was 25 years ago. And then we did, I designed the 5th worst Mario game of all time. It was called an evening. It was actually listed in some magazine. It was called an evening with Mario when I did it, but it was called Mario's Game Gallery. I'm a go fish. You got any Koopas? So yeah, I wrote all the dialogue and designed all the screens, and so they plays checkers and backgammon and Go Fish and dominoes or something. So, but yeah, I designed that game, and I designed a few other things. I did level design for like Bard's Tale Construction Set and Stone Keep and some of the other games. And then me and Berger did a whole bunch of stuff freelance. I worked with them. We worked with Designer Software. Did Rad Warrior for the PC, but I did all the artwork and cleanup. Berger would be doing the port from the Commodore 64 or from some other computer, and they translate the graphics best they could, but the graphics systems were totally different back then. So I'd go through and I'd be cleaning up and redrawing all the graphics for the Apple II. So I did that for years, and then from there, I went to work. I went freelance from Interplay. Started my own company, Allure Generic Productions, and we did 3D modeling and animation and cutscene stuff. And I designed games for everybody. But I worked with Activision, Infocom. Actually helped design their first graphic adventure, which actually was never released. But we did that. I designed a whole bunch of levels for that. Then we went on and I worked for Time Warner Interactive and Epics and Electronic Arts. And I did a whole bunch of stuff on the PC all the way through the 90s. Then I quit to do ministry stuff. So I went into the ministry, and I still do that on BeRighteous.com. We do preaching and teaching Bible stuff. But yeah, all through the 80s and 90s, I did that. When I was in college, my first gig, I was 18 years old. I was working at McDonald's, and it's like I needed something better. So I was looking on the bulletin board at college, and they were looking for a programmer to translate APL code to AppleSoft, because they, back in the day, they had all the VAX 1170s or whatever mainframe they had, and they spent thousands of dollars on a grant or something, and somebody wrote chemistry programs to translate. You put in your experimental data, and it would give you means and moles and your standard deviations and medians. It do all your statistics and stuff, right? So, but the mainframes always broke down, and chemistry labs aren't the best place for sensitive electronic terminals and stuff. So this stuff languished for years. So the way the colleges work is you get grant money, and you have to spend the grant money or you don't get it next year. So if you know there's a big project coming down the pike and you need money for that, but you have the excess money now, you find some pet project to funnel that money into. So the powers that be go, okay, look, you're spending all this money. We'll give it to you next year. So anyway, that was me, and that paid my way through the first 3 years of college. I went in there and they asked me, well, do you know APL? And I said, well, I'm probably rusty at it. If you have a textbook, I could probably figure it out. I had no idea. APL stands for a programming language, and it's incredibly weird. But anyway, so they said, okay, we'll test you out. They gave me a book, and they gave me a stack of printed out tractor feed paper, and I said, okay, write this program, because the program had the listing for it in APL, plus it had a screen dump of what it looked like on the screen. So as long as my program looked the same and did the same thing, they didn't care. So I came back with it. I spent 2 weeks learning APL and then figuring out what the code was, and I did that. And then they said, okay, you got the job, and they gave me 5 foot stack of ultra wide tractor feed paper. Okay, they had like probably 100 programs in that listing somewhere, and they gave that to me. We picked it up in a pickup truck, and I went to work. So, but yeah, I'd say the stuff languished for years and years, and then all of a sudden in the 80s they had an Apple II lab. They said, well, can we make the programs work on the Apple II? It's like, okay, well, we'll do it. So I found out that once I started studying the code, I'm going, oh my God, what do I get myself into? But I found out that 90% of the code was exactly the same in every program. And it only changed like 5% of the code just for whatever the program was actually doing. The rest of it was framework stuff and how to put stuff on the screen and how to format it and stuff. So once I had a skeleton together, I could work for 10 minutes and then charge them for 20 hours. And they had no idea. I was the only person in the whole college that could read the code. And the best part of it, they didn't care, because I was just there to spend their money. And they had to write it down that it was going somewhere. And then a couple of years later, they actually had a need for the money, so I was out of a job.
That's funny. So after that first Apple II Plus, backtracking here a little, that your dad cashed in his life insurance for, which is dedication.
Yeah.
What was next? Was that your last Apple II, or were there Apple IIs after that?
That was I used that one forever. I used that one all through college, all through the first 2 or 3 years when I was doing that. I have a master's degree in mathematics, and with an emphasis on fractal design and nature creation. I did my thesis. I wrote a program where you could design coastlines on a planet and then go down and visit it, it would actually create the landscapes and stuff. That was way back in the day when, before there were voxels and all the other stuff. We were trailblazing back then. We did that, but when I got to that point, I needed to have a PC, so I moved over to the PC for that. While I was using the Apple II for the first 2 years when I was working at the college doing that stuff, and then we eventually transitioned on to that. But I never upgraded from the 2 Plus. I put 64K in it. I had a Z80 card in it, and I had what was it? I had an accelerator in it. It wasn't the Transwarp. It was one of the other ones that was cool. But yeah, I used that all through the 80s. And then we transitioned to that. Now after college, I worked with JPL doing planetary flyovers and stuff like that. So we needed more horsepower. But yeah, I was writing some of the first 3D modeling code for that. And eventually we moved over to 3D Studio and stuff like that. Once the technology caught up with us, I moved over to Real Tools and we did that. But yeah, I didn't. We didn't program the Apple for years after that. It was sitting around. I moved it from place to place. It's still in the garage somewhere at my mom and dad's house. But yeah, but back in the day, my dad cashed in his life insurance. He wanted to bond with us. So originally, I don't know if it was his idea, but I know my mom wanted that. My mom wanted me and my dad to do everything. So we originally had it on the kitchen table, and I couldn't touch it until my dad got home and we could do it. I tell you, I love my dad. He worked 2 jobs. He worked a job in the daytime and he worked a job at night, but he was home for a little bit in between. So we would sit and we work on it, but eventually I took it over. But I guess when you're 13, you don't understand the importance of bonding and everything. I wish I'd understood it now, because wasted so much time. But it was fun. Me and my dad did everything together, and he put that investment into for us to have something to do together, but also to invest in me, to get me to give me a head up on what was coming in the world, because, he knew computers were going to be the thing, and he wanted me in as quickly as we can. And we did. I owe everything to that. And that was part of the reason for Alien Downpour. And the reason I'm committing so much to try to make it right is I want to, give back to, everything it's given me. Everything that's happened in my life started from that. Everything that's happened in my career started with that little machine, and started with the memories we made during those times and all the folks we met. And it's been kind of an opus. But yeah, I never wrote the game for anybody else but me. I just wanted to see how much I could do. And it was funny. About a month and a half ago, I was sitting in my office, and it just dawned on me. It's like, I could write Choplifter from scratch if I wanted to. Oh my goodness. Because you grow up idolizing these people. They're gods. How do you do this? And all of a sudden, once you slog through it and start figuring out, you realize that assembly programming actually is really easy. And it's like, wait, we always looked up to these people like, oh, this is just beyond us. These people must be gods. But no, they're just folks who figured it out. Mm-hmm. And then didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Because they like the adulation. So
yeah. So you'd mentioned online that Alien Downpour is going to be at Kansas Fest this year?
Yes, I'm coming to Kansas Fest. I submitted a thing for a talk. Hopefully I'll get to talk. I want to do at least an hour on the Apple II in general, programming it, plus Alien Downpour and the kind of things you need for a game engine. I'm releasing the game engine for Alien Downpour at some point. It's going to coincide with the book that explains how to do it, but I might have something at Kansas Fest people can see. But I'm hoping to do a presentation on it. If not, we'll just get a bunch of computers and we'll play Alien Downpour or do a tournament or something.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm sure they'll approve the talk there. In fact, I think they put out recently a call for more talks. So
yeah,
sure
well, I didn't even hear about it. I'm on their mailing list, but nobody ever sent me anything. I'm on a mailing list for other 8-bit things where people are news, and somebody announced that they were asking for talks. It's like, well, how come they didn't say anything to me about it? So I went in and immediately put in for that because I think that would be fun. That'd be fun. I used to teach. I could go for hours on stuff like this. I used to teach an 8-hour class on advanced 3D modeling and animation because sometimes it takes 8 hours to set something up, and the little 4-hour formats didn't work for me. So you had to pay $800 to get into my class for that, though.
Yeah. So what's next after Alien Downpour?
Snacking on the Pac-Man clone. I started that originally, and I got 9 or 10 mazes for it. All the Ms. Pac-Man mazes, all the original Pac-Man maze, and then a bunch of stuff I found online. Once I figured out how to draw one maze, I figured, well, let's put all of them in. About 20 years ago, I did a Pac-Man game on the PC in a language called Euphoria. It's an interpreted language. We wrote a whole bunch of games. I wrote an asteroids game that I actually wrote a book on. So I had all that stuff inside my head. So I thought, well, let's see what Pac-Man would look like in high res, and it looks pretty good. It looks really good, and I was really actually impressed with it. The Pac-Man guys, the ghosts, make an appearance in Alien Downpour. They're the second boss you hit are the Pac-Man ghosts. They come in and they drop little flashing energizers at you, and you have to avoid them because you can't blow up the bombs, but they'll blow you up if they hit you. So you gotta. So it's in the game. I didn't want it to have straight just shoot aliens level after level after level because it gets boring after a while. Like Alien Reign is an awesome game, but after about the 5th or 6th level, it's exactly the same. Well, it's exactly the same every level, but after about 5 levels, you're bored with it. So what I did was I have three new aliens, and then an alliance level, which has the 3 aliens doing whatever those 3 aliens do. But there's now 4 different kinds of aliens on the screen, and then I break it up. I have with a slalom zone where we have a bunch of Apple II 40th birthday cakes coming down. You got to avoid them. So you have to get through the slalom zone, and then there's a boss level. The first boss level is a bunch of space invaders that come down, and they drop they shoot you. They drop little zigzag bombs at you, and you got to avoid them. So that level is half shoot the alien, half avoid the stuff coming down at you. And then once you get through the boss level, then we have 4 more levels of regular aliens, and then Then we have a second slalom zone. That's a bunch of big apples. They're apples. Apples come down. It says Apple II Forever, And then we have the second boss. The second boss level is the Pac-Man ghosts, and they come and they drop little power pills at you. You got to avoid. They're flashing. And then we have 3 more levels of aliens, and then we have Toshi Station, which I thought was funny because you're going after Big Boss, which may or may not be Steve Jobs. Okay. but you have to go through Toshi Station. It's actually Macintoshy Station. But you have to go through the power converter levels. It's a throwback to Star Wars, right? But I was going to Toshi Station to pick up some power converters. So it's an electric slalom zone. So it's got like girders. So you have to go through certain places, and there's electric fields. So if the level says choose, but choose wisely, because if you pick the wrong one, you get electrocuted. So you have to zigzag your way through that, and then you meet the final boss. You don't actually shoot Steve Jobs because he's dead, but I thought that would be rude. It's just kind of tongue in cheek. Your mission is to rescue hostages that couldn't be brainwashed into thinking the Mac was a good idea, and because there's some of us that's like, wow, the Mac is insanely great. That's really awesome, but I can't program that. I can't open that up and add stuff to it. Anyway. So, basically your idea is to blow up all the Macs he has in stock so that he has to rethink his priorities. And sadly he doesn't come to our side. He decides to go on to the next big thing. So he disappears. But anyway, you're shooting little happy Macs at the end. And they turn sad and fall on you when you blow them up. So you have to, and the bombs they drop are little open and closed apples. So they're the little apples that are flashing. They come down on you. So, but yeah,
That sounds fantastic.
Oh, it came out really good. I'm really impressed with what happened with it. had no idea when I started it that it would be anything like this. Originally, I was just going to see if I could put aliens on the screen and move them around. And then I said, well, if I can move them around, let's see if I can shoot them. And then, okay, well, they need to animate. And then they started, I got them animating, and then I had them dropping bombs on you. And then all of a sudden it's a game.
It never ceases to surprise me how often I hear on this show, when somebody comes on to promote something, it almost, it starts out so commonly with, well, I wanted to learn assembly language, so I did this. And then at the end of it, we get to experience whatever cool product that they've come up with. And so it's really great to hear that this game came out of that same desire.
Well, yeah, I used to design software, so it's like, once we got it actually where the aliens are moving around and shooting us, okay, well, let's sit down and design this thing. So I have a roadmap to go on. Everything in the game was actually been planned for months and months and months. I'm not just adding stuff on, just because I don't like creeping featureism. Yeah, you want to be able to, you want to have a design. It's like, okay, here's everything in the game. You might tweak some of the stuff that doesn't work, because when you design stuff, you have no idea what physically you can do on the Apple II. If you need to adjust some things or whatever. So. But yeah, it fell into place once I had everything designed. It just, took forever to do it.
Well, thank you for coming on today to share with us and talk about it.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm always available to talk on stuff. It's just, you're the first people ever asked, so I appreciate it.
That's unusual. Well, thank you for, definitely thank you for saying yes then.
Oh, yeah. And you can order Alien Downpour from our website. It's $20 for floppy or cassette, or if you want both, it's $25 because the shipping's the same. So, it only costs $1 to make a cassette. So,
okay.
So yeah, awesome. a lot of folks are getting both of them in collector's items, and I'm packaging them retro style in Ziploc baggies with a little booklet, which I haven't written yet. But that's the next thing in the list. Finish the game and then, write the blurb for it. But it'll all go in and all the pre-orders I'm autographing. So, anybody wants it autographed, let me know. But yeah, I had to actually make a space on the label for that, because I made labels and I showed everybody that, and then people started asking me if I would autograph them. I said, okay, sure, why not?
Awesome. We will link to all that in the show notes for sure.
Oh,
and
thanks.
Thanks again for coming on the show today.
Oh, I appreciate it. I hope I didn't talk your ear off.
Oh, no.
Not at all.
That was wonderful.
Hi, I'm Bill Budge, and you're listening to the Open Apple Podcast.
All right. Well, thanks again, Michael. That was fantastic. We got some news, right, Mike? Why don't we roll into that?
Yeah, let's play some music.
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
So this first item is yours, Mike. It looks like John Romero was Facebook Living some prototype stuff. What's going on here?
Yeah, so this is just a short YouTube video, or I guess Facebook Live, but video of a 2+ prototype that he has, and I don't know where he got it, but there's definitely some interesting things going on in that case that yes, this is not your standard Apple II Plus.
Yeah, it's an interesting beast. It's black, for one thing, and it's got some strange ports on it. So there's not a lot of detail available, but there's some discussion there. So we'll link to that video and the associated discussion on Facebook, and maybe someone has figured out what it is.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's black, and that's so of course that brought up the Bell and Howell. Somebody mentioned that, but I guess both John and Sean Fahey, who's an expert with that particular Apple II Plus, the Bell and Howell have verified that this is not what that is. So this is an interesting beast, to be sure. Yeah. This is something else for sure. Yeah, John Romero pops up now and again in the community, and when he does, it's always something interesting. Yep, I'm still not cool enough or important enough to get an invite to his Apple II reunion, but one can always dream, I guess. Yeah, that's heady company. It is indeed.
All right. Speaking of heady company, actually, Leah Alexander, who we've talked about on the show before, she does the lo-fi Let's Play stuff on YouTube. She's played a lot of Apple II games. She's also an avid podcaster and various other things. And she did a podcast for The Guardian where she talks to Jason Scott, everyone's favorite flamboyant archivist, and everyone's favorite snarky modern-day cracker, 4AM. This is a really great listen, and she talks all about the modern relationship between archiving software and cracking, and the types of work that 4AM and Jason are doing. And this is a really great listen.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. Of course, it's great work and excellent production values, and it's fun to have. I think both of them together on the same show, because you have, 4AM, who's kind of down, getting his hands dirty in the bits and bytes, if you will, and can talk about that. And then Jason, who's kind of got the bigger picture stuff covered as far as what all this means, and we're, gathering mass numbers of disks and just sort of handing them off to 4AM. Together, I think the two of them, plus, the work that Cucumba does, has really been a benefit, not only for the Apple II community, but for, preservationists and digital archivists in general.
Yeah, I think of the two of them as sort of being representatives of their respective groups, because there are a lot of folks doing preservation on that side of it. Not just Jason, but the Call Apple folks are doing a lot, and Stephen Wyrick has done a lot. So there's lots of active preservationists on the history side, and then on the technical, the cracking side, 4AM and Cucumba, and Antoine Vigneault's been doing a lot of cracking for preservation. So it's sort of developed into this two-sided community. Everybody kind of working together to save all this software. I'm really glad to see those two kind of representatives for both sides. All right. So speaking of Mr. Wyrick, he wrote in actually to let us know. So we talked, I think it was last month, about it was the anniversary of what some people were calling the first virus. I don't know, first on the Apple II or first generally. But do you remember what was that virus called? I forgot now.
That was the elk cloner virus.
That's right, elk cloner. Yeah, I always mix it up with Stoned, which was a really early DOS virus.
Yep.
One of my very first jobs was in the IT group at my high school. We had a room full of XTs and or XT clones, and our job was basically to go around and remove Stoned every day, because every single student had it on their floppies, and so every single day, every single machine had Stoned on it again. So that was our job. Was just go. We just had a floppy disk that would remove it, and we just put it into machine after machine, and that would take about an hour, and then we would sit around and play games for 2 hours, and that was the job. So it was pretty good gig. But anyway, the point of all that was Stephen Wyrick wrote in to give us a link to a really great history page of his that lists kind of a nice history of Apple II viruses, because there were more than a few.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They didn't get around much because it's hard to get around on SneakerNet, but they were out there.
Yeah, Dr. Wyrick's resources are definitely of value to anybody who's interested not only in Apple II history, but he does cover a lot of general computing and IT history as well. So it's great stuff. And buy his book, because I think he turned the whole website into a book that you can buy on Amazon. And it's called, Sophistication? He's going to kill me.
Simplicity and Sophistication?
That's the one.
Sophistication and Simplicity. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, something like that. We can't remember books for Facebook groups, and we can't remember this one either. But it's a great book and a nice read, and you should pick it up.
Yeah, we'll link to it, and you can. He always sells it at Kansas Fest as well. So if you're coming to K-Fest, you can buy one there. Yep. And I bet he would autograph it for you.
He sure will.
And it's been a while actually since we linked to AppleIIhistory.org, so we should do that anyway. All right, so this next item is mine. I'm a rabid follower of 4AM's Twitter feed, as I'm sure many of our listeners are. And one of the themes that comes up for me personally is that, of course, he's largely cracking educational software, which was the great uncracked frontier back in the day. And I think if I was going to create a new section for our show, which I'm not going to do because we already have enough sections that we never do anymore, but we have the title of this new section would be "Educational Games Are Underappreciated." Some of these games had fantastic graphics and really great production values, and I'm going to link to a feed on an educational game featuring the Muppets, and 4am goes through the his usual crack post with it, and he's got a bunch of screenshots in there. And the menu system in this game has to be, so it's without a doubt the greatest Muppet-based UI ever created, and I'm going to put it high on the list of UIs. Period. It's a menu system with these big, colorful, friendly icons, and as you select, choosing which icon is selected so you can make your choice, Kermit is behind the menu, kind of reaching around it and pointing at things with his feet or his flippers. I don't know what frogs have, paws. I don't know. Anyway, with he's anthropomorphized, so we'll call them hands. Anyway. So it's this big, beautiful, full-screen graphic of Kermit, and he's wrapping his body around this menu and pointing at stuff, and he animates as you move around. It's just fantastic, and I think someone really put their heart into coding and doing the art for that, and nobody, I think, probably even remembers it. So thank you, 4am, for posting that stuff.
It's shocking how much of that stuff we're finding out now, just 40 years later. How much of that educational software wasn't preserved. And I guess it sort of makes sense if you think about it. I mean, you couldn't just go to an Egghead Software and buy some of these titles. They tended to show up in school. And if you were in school and I don't know about you, but when my teacher caught me trying to crack software, I got in trouble. And, it wasn't something where you could borrow the discs and bring them home and do it. So I think once a lot of that stuff made its way into the storage closets in the basements of the schools, and they were never seen again. And you tend to forget until a project like this begins to resurface the hundreds and hundreds of titles that we haven't seen since then.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you just made, that even if you wanted to crack this stuff back in the day, it would be hard to physically get your hands on the discs because, they weren't selling them in stores. They were sold through, educational back channels, vertically integrated, education software markets. And so, it's not like a student would have access to that. So unless they could sweet talk their teacher into letting them take the discs home or steal them or something, then, you wouldn't have access to it. And then since then, nobody's cracked this stuff because nobody has, nostalgia for most of these games. No one has fond memories of, being forced to do arithmetic with Kermit or whatever. I think a lot of us probably have actually kind of negative memories of that stuff because you felt sort of cheated. I think, at least I did often as a kid, where these were us trying really hard to look like games and make learning fun, but you saw right through it, even as a 8-year-old or wwhatever, that you're just trying to make me learn fractions, and dressing it up with bears and umbrellas or whatever. But at the end of the day, you knew it wasn't a real game. So
I had no idea who Mavis Beacon was, but man, I wanted to kill him or her.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. I mean, there were definitely some gems. I mean, obviously Carmen Sandiego, right. Fantastic games. I personally Rocky's have really fond memories of Rocky's Boots, Robot Odyssey, all the Sunburst games, The Factory. I've actually recreated The Factory as a mobile game in my spare time. I never released it because it didn't come out very good, but The Factory is a terrific game. So there were gems for sure, but by and large it was Muppets and fractions. So anyway, I don't think anyone remembers them very fondly, but definitely look at this Twitter feed and marvel at as I said, the pinnacle of Muppet-based UI. Okay, moving right along. We had 6502 Workshop on the show last month, and we talked lots about Nox Archaist. And one of the nifty things they're doing with that game is kind of quote-unquote marketing it with these vignettes from the engine, these little short stories that they're telling using the game engine as they add features. And so there's a new one of those out. It's called Catapult, but with cows. Mm-hmm. And it's a two-parter. We will link to the first part. As we record this, part 2 just came out, so I don't have a link to that on hand, but I'm sure you can follow the links in YouTube from part 1. So we will put that in the show notes. And it is entertaining as always.
I love it.
Okay, so we was it last month or month before the last? We ragged on 8BitDo's gamepad quite a bit, and Yeah, maybe we were a little hard on them, but somebody out there is listening because actually there has been a firmware update for that thing. Now, we weren't sure last time we talked about it if it was even possible to update the firmware on this thing. And for anyone who doesn't remember, the main issue with it is that the analog stick on this thing was not actually analog. It was just hard coding 3 left, center, and right values for the joystick. And so it really wasn't playable for most Apple II games that needed an analog joystick. It might work for Lode Runner or a couple of others, but really pretty limited. So they have fixed that somewhat. Chris Torrance has a great review of that firmware update. And so it turns out you can update the firmware, which is great. And on his Apple IIe, the analog stick now actually works quite well. There's still a few issues with it. It doesn't quite reach 0 or 255 at the extremes. I think it gets down to like 11 and it gets up to like 243 or something like that. So if you have a game, a lot of games had joystick calibration sequences in them before you started. So if you have one of those, this would work great because you could calibrate it and it wouldn't care too much about not having the full range of motion. But some games didn't. So some games might be looking for numbers close to 0 to move left, and so you might not be able to move left, that kind of thing. So there may be some issues there. And for some reason, Chris tried it on the 2 Plus, and it didn't seem to work at all on the 2 Plus either. The numbers were kind of crazy. So it's definitely improvement, but hopefully they'll update it again because my guess is that they tested this upgrade on their own Apple IIe or whatever Apple II they had access to. But so I'll dive into a mini tech segment here. For anyone who doesn't know how the analog sticks on the Apple II actually work, it's a pulse counter basically. So there's a 555 timer in the Apple II that's generating pulses, and the resistance in the joystick is used to control the speed of those pulses, and then there's a timer that counts them. And so there's an RC circuit in there. And so the exact performance of the joystick is going to vary a little bit from Apple II to Apple II because there's an RC circuit in there. So there's a resistor and a capacitor. There's resistors in the joysticks and capacitors in the Apple II. And no electronic component is exactly on spec. They're all plus or minus a few percent. Sometimes they can be as off as 10 or 12%. Of what their rated value is. So the designer has done the math for the exact value, the ideal value, but they're going to vary by some amount. So, a pulse counter based on an RC circuit isn't never going to be the same on any 2 Apple IIs. So you kind of have to design something like a joystick to overshoot quite a bit to encompass all of that variation. So you'd want to, kind of give your range from, well below 0 to well above 255. If, you can think of it that way. So they may have tuned it to exactly 0, 255 on their own personal 2E, but then on Chris's, for example, it's not reading the same range. So hopefully they'll take another shot at that. Seems like somebody out there is listening, and it's nice to see that they're at least working on it.
Yeah, so often the companies will put a piece of hardware out there, and by the time it gets into the hands of the users, and they begin to discover that there are problems, the company's already 3 generations ahead, and they've their only advice is, well, upgrade, so it's mm-hmm. nice that they're not doing that. Yeah, they do seem to actually care, so that's great. Weird.
People still care. All right, so in our last Soft Talk review, we talked a little bit about Rainbow Software. In fact, our last couple of issues, we've talked about that. Yeah. And we were sort of marveling at how their logo looks so much like the early Online Systems logo does, Rainbow Software being a chain of software stores. So listener Jake wrote in with a fantastic story about that. In fact, there was a bit of a discussion on Twitter between myself and Paul Hegstrom and a couple other folks about that whole thing and trying to figure out if there was a connection there or what. And we think there is. So Jake was a frequent patron of Rainbow Software. He said he used to hang out there as a youth, and the Northridge location in the north part of Los Angeles was his store. That was where he hung out. And it turns out that Ken and Roberta Williams also hung out there. Oh. That was their main store that they went to, was this Rainbow Software in Northridge. And that was also where they sold their very first copies of Mystery House. So when they first produced that game, they went and brought them to Rainbow Software Northridge and said, hey, please sell our game. So there's a very, very direct connection there. So it seems safe to say that the Online Systems logo was at least inspired by Rainbow Software. Certainly it was in their consciousness when they started that company. So it might well be some borrowing happening there.
Oh, yeah. See, we had actually accused Rainbow of stealing from Online because we'd heard of Online and not so much Rainbow, and it turns out to have been maybe the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. So apologies to Rainbow Software. Yeah, that's more proof that the winners write the history books.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of things that we covered poorly, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, we talked about Caverns of Mordia and how that had been resurrected at, I believe, at WASFest. So listener Neville sent in a couple of links, or a link related to this. I think I wanted to mention it again because now that we have this link, and he kind of tells the story in a nice blog post. So I think so what had actually happened is he had ordered some floppies, I think online, and in that package was this game Caverns of Mordia that he'd never heard of. And he actually did some quite excellent sleuthing work to figure out who the author of this game was. And turns out the author of this game was still around. And it was in Australia. So he invited the author to WASFest, and he showed up. And he had some original discs, and he had all his original drawings and notes from development of the game, and all the maps and everything. So that Neville's got great photos of all this stuff in his blog posts. So definitely worth a look. This is a game that I think neither of us had heard of, which is why when we talked about it the first time, we kind of glossed over how interesting this story actually is. So it may have been just an Australian release, small release type of thing. But we'll link to that story, and hopefully this is a little bit better coverage of it.
Super cool.
Yeah, and Neville also in that same email sent us some information about his personal 2GS that they also resurrected at WASFest. He had, like many of us, moved it from house to house over the years, and it sat in boxes, and he finally decided to dust it off, but he had no idea if it worked. And so he cracked open the boxes, and rather than just trying to fire it up on the spot or whatever, he just took it all to WASFest, and kind of as a group, they decided to see if they could resurrect it. And so he tells the whole story there in another entertaining blog post. And of course, with the 2GS, like many of us, he had a hard drive. And so that's the real big question mark is does the hard drive spin up? And so there's a lot of tension around that. They do manage to get it imaged. There was some bad blocks and stuff, but looks like it all worked out in the end. So good on them for doing that.
Yeah, one of the things I always look forward to every year when I go to Kansas Fest is bringing along some dead hardware that either I haven't had time to get to or that has outsmarted me, and getting together with people who know what they're doing and coming home a week later with working stuff, because there's so much brains and talent there, and it's nice to hear that that's happening elsewhere as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then of course the flip side of that is someone's computer always lets out the magic smoke every year at K-Fest, and I always felt like we should have a prize for that or something. First magic smoke of K-Fest, but it's usually, I think these days, one of the disk imaging computers because they're working hard the whole time. Yeah, and actually, last year, Mark Pilgrim brought his Pravits to K-Fest with the hopes of possibly getting it fixed, because it kind of worked, but it had some issues, and sadly it did. A few of us, including myself, poked at it for quite a while, but we weren't able to squeeze much life out of it, and I think by the end it was actually worse. It was kind of working when it arrived, and it didn't really work at all when it left, so it's hard to say what all happened there. I don't know if we made something worse by trying to fix it, but he, I think, had plans of taking it to someone who was a proper electrical engineer who could properly diagnose and fix it. So hopefully that happened, and maybe it'll show up again this year. All right, Mike, this next one's yours. You got some WASFest announcements for us?
Yeah, so WASFest, of course, recently happened, and Andrew Rowan posted over at A2 Central a few of the more interesting ones. The recaps basically were that the Manila Gear has announced that their version of the no slot clock is now available for pre-ordering. It had first been announced at WASFest 5.25 back in November, and they had run into some delays for software testing. We'll have a link to that in the show notes if you want to pre-order from them. John Brooks announced that he's working on a new version of ProDOS 8 that will incorporate the drivers for the no-slot clock and the D-clock. It's not available yet, but it looks like it's already in testing, so hopefully we'll see that soon. And Sean McNamara has produced an electrolytic capacitor spec and check sheet for the Aztec power supply, which is useful if you're refurbishing an early Apple II or the Apple II Euro Plus power supply units. And there's a link to a blog post about that, and we'll include all of that plus the write-up, the organizer's write-up about WASFest PR number 6 in the show notes.
Awesome. Wow, Manila Gear is they're really making things happen there.
Yep, cranking that stuff out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And John Brooks' dedication to continue improving ProDOS is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this next one looks like yours as well. What's going on here?
Yeah, so Stephen, I hope I pronounced it right, Human, Heumann, has released a product called AFP Bridge. It's a tool for the Apple II GS that allows you to connect to file servers using the AFP, the Apple Filing Protocol, over TCP/IP, and it works by using the existing Apple Share FSTs. So, but the network traffic goes over TCP/IP rather than Apple Talk. And what's nice about this basically is that it saves you from having to set up a local talk network when you're grabbing files from your local file servers. So, a really convenient thing to have.
Boy, that's really cool. Okay, yeah. I'm going to have to dust that one off when I dust off my 2GS.
The only requirement is that you have a Marinetti-compatible Ethernet-type connection in your 2GS to obviously get online.
Excellent. Well, this next fellow could use such a thing. So this is a video that I came across in a non-traditional Apple II feed. I don't know where it came from, but it's a fellow who he's actually a Linux blogger or a Linux podcaster, I should say, and he also has a video feed for his podcast. And he apparently has been doing this thing where every so often he will take an older computer and try using it as his real computer for doing his real work for a period of time, like a week or two. Yeah, it's an interesting endeavor. So he's done it with, I think, a couple of old Macs and a couple of old DOS machines and things like that. So this time around, he's doing it with the 2GS. And so he's got this video where he kind of sets it up. He talks about the 2GS a bit, the history of it, and it's interspersed with a bunch of ads for Linux products. So you kind of may want to have your finger on the skip button a little bit, but unless you're super into Linux products. Clearly, he's, a Linux podcaster who makes his living shilling Linux gear. But
Sure.
Anyway, it's a fun watch. He's very enthusiastic. He's done his homework, but he's not someone who was like a 2GS user back in the day. So he's kind of coming at it from with fresh eyes, but he has done his homework. So he definitely got deep into this for setting this up. Now he's not using real hardware. This is all in emulation. He's using GS port, but you can definitely tell that he did his homework. I will say this is the kind of video that may raise your nerd rage because he does get some stuff wrong. He says some things that aren't true and stuff in the video, but it's all in good faith, and his enthusiasm is fantastic. He's very excited about it, and so he's going to do a second follow-up video in a couple of weeks. This video just came out as of this recording, so maybe a few days from now as we record, the second video will be available. It should probably be shown from the first video on YouTube. But it'll be very exciting to see what comes of it. He experiments with different types of word processors and so on to figure out which ones he can use for his, his actual writing and stuff that he does. The main stumbling block he runs into is getting data in and out of it, which ironically would be a lot easier if he had real hardware. He could use a CFFA, or he could use ADT Pro, or there's lots of different ways, he could do it, floppy emulators, things like that, SD card emulators. But being in GS port, he's struggling a bit more. So hopefully, he mentions Apple Talk as one possible option. He mentions Marinetti a few times, though he doesn't quite seem to know what it is. So he mentions the TCP/IP stack and some things like that. So hopefully he gets it all sorted out. There's a long YouTube comment thread there about it. So hopefully someone jumped in who knew this stuff and filled him in with all of the latest, because it does seem clear that he's coming at this from the outside, so he hasn't been in the community, so he doesn't know all of the new hardware and tools and stuff that we have developed for solving all these types of problems. But can't fault him for that. So hopefully he got some help and has a good experience using his 2GS in 2017.
Cool.
Yeah, he's an entertaining guy to watch, and his production values are really great. So worth a quick view.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think that's all of the news items. Yes,
I think that's it for news.
All right. We have one eBay item this month, so let's roll into that.
Look, rare! Steve Jobs. Look what we found on eBay.
So this is, again, I don't know where I came across this, but I got really excited about it. So we've talked a lot about GEOS on the show, and we did a whole show dedicated to it a few months ago. We're both big fans of GEOS. Tell me if you knew this, Mike. Did you know that there were laptops dedicated to running GEOS?
I did not.
I did not know that either. There's a whole family of these things. They were called GeoBooks. And so
now I want one.
Yeah, so do I. So one showed up on eBay a while back, and this one was by a brother, better known for making typewriters and things. And so we'll link to the eBay auction in the show notes so you can kind of see what one of these things looks like. So apparently GEOS, after all the 8-bit computers died, they didn't give up on their system, and they marketed it to other types of systems. So listeners probably remember kind of in the late 90s, there were this category of devices that looked sort of like electric typewriters, but they were kind of dedicated word processors. Do you remember those things?
Oh, yeah. I saw those everywhere. I saw those everywhere for a while.
Yeah. For people who were still a bit scared by computers, but didn't want to use a typewriter, there was this kind of middle ground. So these things are like that. They're sort of like, they look a bit like kids' laptops or something, like toys, but they are supposedly for real work. And so these are sort of these special purpose office suite laptop-looking things. And they run GEOS. So it's sort of like it's running GEOS under the hood, but the UI has been simplified. There's no mouse or anything. It's just like big buttons for selecting things and stuff. Anyway, so we'll link to the auction, and I dug up a site. For every weird hardware device, there's someone out there who has dedicated their life to the to the history and preservation of these things. So there's a GeoBook site out there that explains all about them, including how to modify them and how to diagnose problems with them. And yeah, it's great. So we'll link to that site as well. It's a really fascinating little corner of GEOS lore that I had no idea existed. So, yeah, neat stuff.
What do you mean? I would never do that with the Apple III.
We already had our Apple III reference.
Oh, yeah, I suppose that's true.
All right. Okay, so that's all for eBay, which is good because we don't talk about eBay on this show. But we do sometimes talk about weird games. We haven't done that in a while, but hey, we got a segment, so let's do the bumper.
You know Choplifter, you know Load Runner, but do you know this? It's time for a weird game.
So Mike, talk to me about your weird game.
Okay, well, those of you who have listened to the show for a while and have suffered through my rants probably know that I wasn't allowed to play certain Apple II games growing up. My parents are fundamentalist Christians, and they have some what I would consider odd beliefs about certain things, and that translated into me not being allowed to play games like Ultima and Wizardry and anything with magic or dragons or fun. And there was a title that I had completely forgotten about, actually, until recently, called Might and Magic, which was actually a fairly popular game, I think, on the Apple II. Did you ever play that, Quinn?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
I was really into that game.
Yeah, so this is one of the games that I was not allowed to play because it had the word magic in the title. And But just recently, I've been spending way too much time and more money than my wife would like over on GOG.com, Good Old Games. And in addition to, I think they've got may have a bunch of the old Sierra and Lucasfilm titles, and you can get some of the Ultimate games as well. They also have Might and Magic, and I think you can get the first 6 games. They have the 6-pack limited edition for $9.99. And I think that's just for the Windows version of it. I mean, and I bought it and played it a little bit. And of course that just made me want the Apple II version because it reminded me that I was playing the crappier PC version. But I've really been getting into this game recently. I'm still on the first of like 7 or 8 that they ended up producing over the years. It's a forward-looking POV on everything, so it sort of feels like the Bard's Tale, but the scale is much larger. You got several towns that you can explore in a huge outdoor area, and it feels very much at first like the sword swinging medieval fantasy type thing. But as you play the game, you begin to discover that it's a whole lot more than that. And there's some science fiction stuff that shows up later that I'm exploring. But I was surprised at how deep and how deep and well designed this whole game is. There's hours and hours of play. And so if you've never sat down and played through this, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I played a lot of the original, the first Might and Magic on the Apple II, and it was a great game. It was kind of like Bard's Tale 3, but sort of around the Bard's Tale 1 era, where, as you said, it was basically Bard's Tale gameplay, but it had a lot more scope. There was a lot of wilderness exploration and that kind of thing happening. So, I agree. Those are great games, worth revisiting. I have a sort of a weird career crossover with Might and Magic.
Okay.
For a while, kind of at the turn of the millennium there, I worked at 3DO, and 3DO and they had acquired the Might and Magic IP after, what was the name of the company that originally started those games?
It was, hang on.
It had a very fantastical sounding name. I forget what it was.
New World Computing, that was it.
New World Computing, thank you. Our listeners are all screaming at their iPods, New World Computing. So they had acquired Might and Magic from New World Computing, and New World Computing, they made a lot of really awesome stuff back in the day. They were kind of the Westwood or the Bullfrog of their day. Anyway, so 3DO made the series of Heroes of Might and Magic games, the kind of a little bit more action-y third-person kind of versions of the game. And I was actually originally hired at 3DO with the prospect of working on the Heroes of Might and Magic series because I was really into that series and I was really excited to start work on that game. And then on my first day, I found out I was not getting put on that project. And I got put on this other game I was not interested in working on and never did get to work on it. So that was kind of a letdown. But anyway, so aside from, that little professional deception, I have very fond memories of that whole franchise.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And, we mentioned New World Computing. Apparently, so the game was written by a guy named John Van John something. And he could not find anyone who would market and publish this game for him. And so he started New World Computing on his own. And for a while, I guess it was just him doing distribution out of his own apartment until he made enough money to attract Activision's attention, and that's when things really, I guess, took off for him. So, but yeah, they published there were 7 or 8 titles, or I guess what you might consider classic titles, and I think are they still pumping out versions now? Like they're on to like 9 or 10, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what the current status of that IP is now that both New World and 3DO are gone. I don't know if someone still owns that or what's going on. But anyway, Cool. Well, thanks for bringing that one up.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it.
Cool. All right, let's move on to some feedback.
You've listened to us talk. Now it's time to tell us what you think.
So we got just a couple of emails this month. First one is from listener Brian. He writes to tell us, I'm a month behind on listening to all the podcasts that I subscribe to. I was just listening to the February podcast when you were talking about Soft Talk Volume 1, Number 3. You quickly talked about the ad for Howard Software Services, Howard Soft, where they were offering 3 products: Tax Preparer, Real Estate Analyzer, and Stock Portfolio Manager. I'm sure I said something snarky and unfair about them. Brian goes on to say they are still in business as Howard Soft, and they are still selling their Tax Preparer software.
Oh, wow.
You can visit their software at howardsoft.com, which is awesome. And I could have found that out if I'd spent 8 seconds Googling. So thanks for filling us in on that, Brian. Brian says, I started using Howard Soft's Tax Preparer back in the 80s on my Apple II and then my 2GS. At some point, Howard Soft started offering their software for PCs as well as Apple IIs. And then when the Macintosh came out, they decided to ignore that platform. Rather, they modified their MS-DOS software to run within Windows, and eventually the market for their software running on Apple II died, and so they just ended up offering the Windows version. And so when that happened, I had to get Windows to run an emulation on my Mac, first with Virtual PC, and these days with Parallels. Wow, that's dedication.
Yeah.
Their Tax Preparer software is marketed to professional tax preparers. That's why we haven't heard of it. Though I still use it to prepare my own taxes. It costs me a little over $100 to get the yearly update each year. So that's really cool. He's been using Howard Soft's Tax Preparer software continuously since the early 1980s, which is fantastic. Going so far as to run the Windows version in Parallels just to keep using it. So I love that story. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. That's really, really cool. I can't think of any other software that anyone could have been using continuously since 1980. I mean, maybe WordPerfect, something like that, but or possibly Word if you're willing to go a little bit later. But yeah, that's great stuff. So good on you, Howard, for continuing to make your software. That's funny. I guess, we made fun of Howard Soft, this company that probably no one's heard of, but little did we know that he's survived while so many other, big name companies are all long gone.
Yep. We make fun of a lot of things on this that we probably shouldn't, but
yeah, it's true enough. Yeah. He's got a great niche there.
Well, and in fact, Jim Sammons had wrote in previously about a similar ad that we had poo-pooed a little bit. It's a bit of a long email, so I'll save it for next time, but it's a fascinating story. And it's just a reminder that what you hear on here probably isn't fact all the time. So because
Yes.
as Quinn said, if either of us had bothered to Google for 8 seconds, would have known this. So
Yes. Don't get your news from us because we are just two idiots with microphones.
that's right.
Open Apple is proof that the barrier to entry for podcasting is embarrassingly low.
Low.
All right. Moving right along. Listener Tom Porter, who writes us in fairly often. He's doing lots of great stuff with audio. We've talked a little bit about that in recent episodes. He did a MIDI converter thing for the Mockingbird, which is really cool. He did that. He's been working on an audio engine that you can run out of aux memory on 2Es that's almost behaves like an interrupt-driven, multi-threaded audio system, but for the Apple II, which has neither threads nor interrupts, so that's fantastic. Anyway, so we talked a bit about last month about Dogfighters of Mars, and he had put out a version of it with his cool audio engine, and I think we credited it. It's a double low-res game. I think we credited it to him, and actually he writes in to let us know it was made by Brian Peachy. So yes, shame on us. We should have
been
known
on the
that.
show.
Yes, Brian has been on the show. We've talked about Brian's other games, Retro Fever, and some of the other ones lots. So we definitely should have known that. Our apologies to Brian on that one. Okay, so let's see. Listener Kevin writes in to say, hi, Open Applers. The podcast is wonderful. I have a question and would appreciate your input. I purchased the Assembly Lines book by Chris Torrance to learn Apple II assembly, specifically for a low-resolution game idea. The book focuses on high-resolution graphics. Do you know of a good book explaining low-resolution in assembly? That is an excellent question. I will put that to our listeners. I don't know of a specific book that explains it. I don't know if it's covered in any of the other books. I believe, for example, the book that Michael Packard mentioned, The Arcade Game Design, is also all high-res. So I'm not sure. Now, the thing about low-res, I will say, is that it's actually very simple. There's so few pixels and it just sits in the text page of memory. So it's actually and the memory map is a lot more sane than high-res. So it's actually pretty straightforward. I think if you learn how to let's say learn how to draw text anywhere on the screen with assembly, and then read like the Red Book or something that explains the low res memory map, then I think you're basically on your way. It's pretty straightforward. I believe there's 2 pixels per byte. Each is 4 bits, and that's your 16 colors. So there's no palettes or anything like in high res. There's no weird high bit stuff or anything. No bit shifting required. It's just direct 4-bit color. So pretty straightforward to code for. But if anyone knows of either a book or maybe an old Roger Wagner column or something like that we might be able to link Kevin to, write in and let us know.
Yeah, we'll be happy to share.
Yeah, that's all the feedback I have. Any from your side, Mike?
I don't think. Oh, well, yeah, I do have one. We'd mentioned Dr. Weirich earlier in the show talking about the history of viruses and that sort of thing. He also wrote in to let us know, because we had talked about the 40th anniversary of the Apple II, and we were wondering why it was April when they didn't start selling it until June, that sort of thing. And he wrote in to let us know that some people are calling April the 40th anniversary of the Apple II. It is the 40th anniversary of the West Coast Computer, the first West Coast Computer Fair, where the first prototypes of the II were demonstrated. But the product itself was not available for shipping until May 10th, 1977 for the motherboard-only versions, and June 10th, 1977 for the full system, including a case, keyboard, power supply, etc. In my opinion, to say that the Apple II was released in April of 77 is like saying the Commodore PET was available in January 77. When it was introduced at CES, it was not available for purchase until October, and the TRS-80 was not available until August 77. So a little clarification on dates. Thank you, Dr. Steve.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would feel better about calling that, was it June 10th when you could order the one with the case?
Yes.
I would sort of feel like that, calling that the sort of the real start date, because that's the Apple II that anyone would recognize and could actually buy. So that seems like a reasonable date.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. No doubt people will be arguing about that until the end of time.
Yeah, we're going to get a bunch of email.
Yeah. But yes, feel free to email us about that and tell us how wrong we are about that and everything else. We get a lot wrong here, and we always like to hear about it. Or if you have any other thoughts, feel free to write to us, feedback@open-apple.net. And with that, I think that's all we've got to talk about this month. Mike, any closing thoughts?
Just that, if you appreciate what we're doing here, we'd love if you helped out with our Patreon. The money that is donated there goes towards hosting and bandwidth entirely. We don't run ads, and you're not missing out on anything by not contributing. But if you do, then feel good about yourself. And we thank you and love you.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. It's worth mentioning again that we have a high quality audio production here, and we have no ads, and we have the entire back catalog of the show always available, which those features cost us actual cash money. So your support is much appreciated. We will link to the Patreon in the show notes as always, and it's always available on our website, open-apple.net. All right. Well, thanks again for podcasting with me, Mike.
Thank you.
And we'll see everybody next month.
Yeah, and thanks to Michael for coming on and telling us about Alien Downpour.
Yes, go pre-order now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, before we get to Gary and our other guests, we're going to take you inside a computer to see exactly what the operating system does.
Hello, can I help you?
Yeah, where are we?
Well, you're standing inside an Apple IIe microcomputer.
And who are you?
Well, I'm Bruce Tognazzini. I'm an engineer with Apple Computer, and I'm here to check out and make sure everything is perfect on this computer, because we have a report that in just a few seconds here, one of our owners is going to be turning this computer on.
And what is all this stuff?
Well, these are the parts that make up an Apple computer. That particular chip that you're standing on is called a microprocessor, and it's pretty much the heart of the computer, kind of the moderator of the talk show that goes on. And these two chips down here, these are very important ROM chips, which have the built-in basic language and the very kernel of the operating system. And then these 8 chips out here are the RAM chips, and they hold the information that comes in from the disk drive and that the user types and the programs and so forth.
Bruce, we're trying to figure out what an operating system does, and maybe you could help explain it.
Well, sure. An operating system essentially runs the entire computer once it's come in, but right now it hasn't turned on all of it. I see the user's about to flick on the switch. It's all right. It's only about 12 volts. The power light goes on, and then the little microprocessor here has the job of checking itself out and then turning control over to this ROM chip. This ROM chip, in turn, has a very small program which goes back to the back of the computer and checks out and sees whether it can find a disk controller card, which of course it can because there's one plugged in here. And on the disk controller card is another ROM, and this ROM now takes control from that one and begins to bring in the disk operating system off the disk drive through this white cable. You probably saw the disk drive while you were on your way in here. And then that comes down and starts filling in these RAM chips here. Fills up about 1/5 to 1/4 of the RAM chips with the disk operating system. It brings in any language and perhaps any program the user wants to do. And after about 15 to 30 seconds, it's all done. The screen gives a message to the user, and then the user can go to work.
Okay, well, I've got to get back to the Computer Chronicles. Thanks a lot.
Certainly, thank you.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback@open-apple.net.